Hello everybody. Yep, and welcome to this strange way of doing things. Well, maybe not strange, just new and different, but it's good fun learning new things, I always think. So we'll get on. I've got lots to try and pack into our short time here, so I'll just crack on with things, talking a bit about wildlife recording and sort of specifically in gardens. So I'm just going to do sort of a bit of the bigger picture and, let you know about Eric and who we are, about wildlife recording in general, and then have a sort of focus on gardens in particular. So Eric isn't a person, it's a thing, if you like, and it's the Environmental Records Information Centre. We're based at the Great North Museum at Hancock in Newcastle, and it's a small team. Paul is here. Paul's our coordinator. Paul's here, and if you've got any questions, you can put them through on the chat as we go, and Paul can answer questions as we go along if things come up as I'm talking. We'll also have a chance to do some questions and answers at the end. There's me, and then there's Anne and Irena, who are like the data officers. They're at the conference somewhere as well today. So they deal with all the information that we hold in the database. And we've also got a great team of volunteers, and we really couldn't do what we do without having the volunteers. There's just such a volume of data to deal with, and the volunteers really help us with that. So yeah, as I say, Eric's Environmental Records Information Centre, and it's basically a place where lots of wildlife, as many as possible, wildlife sightings are pooled into one sort of area. So then there's a more accurate picture of species distributions and changes over time, rather than one organisation having some information here and another organisation within there. If it's all in one place, it's a bit like a picture. There's more detail and more information in one place. And we've currently got over 3.7 million records, so it's quite a lot of data. And then we get the data coming in, but we also make it available to people who need it for nature conservation purposes. So the data goes out as well. It's our area is quite large, and I like the pointer thing. Instead of waving my hands, I can wave this around. So our area is right up to the Scottish border, down the Cumbrian border, along by North Yorkshire, and then we've obviously got a fantastic coastal strip as well. So Tees Valley's down here, so we're all in the same sort of area together. And the local environmental record centres are a sort of nationwide loose sort of network. Different ones are set up in slightly different ways. We're a community interest company, but there are sort of equivalents to us around most of the country where wildlife records are pooled locally, so we can get a good sort of picture of local wildlife. And the data comes from all sorts of places: individuals, groups, community groups, friends of groups, and also professional organisations out doing surveys. All that data comes in, and it all adds into getting a great picture of sort of local wildlife, and just getting that detail in there. The more information there is in the one place, the more sort of detail there is. So yeah, wildlife records. Apologies if you're perhaps a seasoned recorder, but I think we've got sort of a mixture of people in the audience who've got sort of different skills. So a wildlife record, for it to be useful, it needs 4 pieces of information, and that just needs to be documented and recorded. The sort of opposite of a good wildlife record is, the sort of thing like, oh yeah, we used to have blue butterflies in that field, and oh, when did I last see them? Oh, was it a couple of years ago? That's all just like too vague and is anecdotal, not enough clear information. The people that use the data, policymakers, councils, people making changes need facts and figures. So for a record to be valid and useful, it needs, we need to know what it is, who recorded it, when it was recorded, and where it was recorded. So for the species name, if you might start to think, oh, but I don't know what anything is. Don't worry about that too much. If you can get a good photo, a good clear picture of it, or perhaps a sound recording if it's bird song, then we can help you get it identified. We can put you in touch with experts. So we need to get the organism identified. So a good photo is a great start for that. With the observer name, we need that in case we just need to ask a few more questions or get a bit more detail. So it just sort of validates the data as well. It's a real person really recording it. The date's important because often distributions of species are looked at over time. How have they changed? So we need the date, and then the location's obviously important for physical distribution. So we've sort of got temporal distribution and physical distribution. So the four main things that we need are the sort of what, who, when, and where with the data. So it goes from you spot something out in your garden, and then perhaps we've got a recording portal on our website, or perhaps you're submitting it via an app into another organisation, and you could perhaps send it straight in. Or perhaps you have a logbook and you just note things down, and then you can send the logbook to us, or you can put it straight into a recording portal yourself. So it ends up in the database, and those 4 bits of information are there. They won't accept the record unless all the information's there. And to make a sort of submission, you need an account. So we've got the who, the person. The observer is automatically there, and then recording the species name, the location, and the date. So all of the records are in a standardized form with all those 4 bits of information in the database, and then that makes the information usable. And then it's easy to sort of pull bits of information out. And Paul will correct me if I'm wrong, but with the sort of geo software now, a mapping software, we can do things like put a site boundary in and pull out wildlife records for that area, can search it by grid squares, species, look at how a species has changed over time, and taxa and other searches. So once all that information's in the standardized form, it can then be sort of pulled out and looked at and interpreted and begin to tell stories from it. And then the data that's used is like planning permissions when there's developments. So, sites have to be sort of analysed for their wildlife content. Scientists sometimes ask for our data if they're looking at changes in species distributions and habitats when they're being looked at. And also we're involved in producing publications. We recently helped to produce the Bumblebees of Northeast England booklet. So the information is great if it's sitting in the database, but it's even better if it's getting pulled out and getting used. So and another thing that's interesting is absence of data can be actually a useful thing to know. In this project, the habitats for pollinators, these are sort of like corridors. So when that's mapped, gaps can be spotted, and then there can be targeted conservation projects. Money, resources are all short. So rather than sort of randomly making pollinator habitats all over the place, but where they are fit into coordinated corridors, that could just be a way of spotting where you need to target your resources. So that was a project that happened a few years ago, the Bug Life project, just improving the sort of corridors for pollinators. So yeah, absence of data can be sort of almost as interesting as the presence of things. And the great thing about doing wildlife recording, and especially from gardens, is basically nearly anybody can do it. Not everyone, lots of people want to help wildlife and do something for conservation, but not everyone can climb up a mountain and plant 1,000 trees, or dig a pond, or put up a fence, or plant things. So, but nearly everybody can look out their window and spot things and make a note of them. And it's just a really accessible way of actually helping, because as you can see, the data is used in real life conservation projects. So it is actually important. Even doing things from your garden feeds into a bigger picture. So I was having a bit of a dig around in the good old Office of National Statistics the other day, and there are actually 520,000 hectares of residential garden areas in urban Britain, in urban Great Britain. And just for comparison, Northumberland is like about 500,000 hectares. So we've got an area bigger than the area of Northumberland that is residential gardens. Quite a sizable area. Now, that's not even counting public green space and gardens in rural areas. So gardens are actually, a really important area for wildlife and wildlife conservation. It's a significant amount of habitat. So, and the other thing is we can sometimes sort of, maybe just think, oh, it's just my garden. Gilbert White, who's sometimes considered as the father of ecology, did all his work and studies basically from his own garden. Okay, it was quite a big garden. I have visited it once when I was down in Hampshire, so it is quite a big garden. But it was he just basically lived and worked in his own parish and did loads of observations and studies, and sort of was one of the initiators of the sort of like natural history and valuing, relationships between species. So he did major work just from his own garden. And another great thing about gardens is that they're accessible to nearly everybody. And even if you've not got a garden, just sort of walking in your local area or your local park, and birds obviously move around, so you can see things just out of your window. So they're there every day, accessible every day, don't need to have any transport, and you get to know your garden and get to spot things. You can do wildlife observations just sitting there with a cup of tea and a bit of cake. If you've been out doing surveys in the lashing rain, then that's something to really appreciate. And it's also an opportunity to engage the wider family, and especially maybe younger members. But all of these factors, I feel, add in to making recording wildlife in gardens, a real sort of potentially sustainable way of getting longer term records, which are a really valuable resource when you've got things recorded over the longer term, sort of more of a longitudinal study, if you like. So recording wildlife in gardens is a great sort of thing to do, and it's important. And we would want you to record everything. People often think, oh, it's not that interesting. It's just, I've just got dandelions and daisies. But we actually need to know the distribution of common species as well. Hedgehogs, 30 years ago, it was the common or garden hedgehog, but now we know that they are in decline. And we need those sort of baselines of what the distribution is. I'm sure we all know there are areas of the world where species are being lost before we even know what they are. Now, Britain's is quite well documented and has a long history of recording, but still unusual things turn up in places that they maybe haven't seen before. And then again, with climate change, all of that data is important, and it can signal things. So recording wildlife is a real valuable thing to do. So you don't even need to just record actual species. Signs count as well. You know, that hedgehog poo in your garden only got there because there really was a hedgehog there. So the fields are important, and they count as well. Oh, I'm just better got some music from the other part of the conference coming through. So the field signs are important as well, and they count as evidence of species. And as I was saying earlier, it's a way of really making a difference and actually contributing to nature conservation. And even if you can't get out and do more physical things, and it's you get a lot out of it yourself, because you improve your own ID skills, and it's fun. You know, as you get to know one group, you can maybe you're good at birds, you have a go at bumblebees. So it's a great way of learning, and you don't need lots of resources. I mean, the main thing's probably an ID book and a notebook, and then you can just get out and look with your own eyes. So it's not expensive to begin. If you get into things, then obviously you might want to buy some more equipment. You might get into moths and want a moth trap or bat detector, things like that. But certainly to begin with, it's you know, low key as far as resources. So it's an extremely accessible way of doing things. Get in touch with us. We can help you if you need a bit of support. There's a small grant fund that we usually have sort of round about Christmas time that goes out, and the closing date's usually end of January, and we can put you in touch with experts and other groups. There's lots of support out there. Usually we've got ID work going on. Obviously that's all on hold at the moment, but we're just getting to think about other ways of doing that and being able to support people with ID, and obviously hopefully at some point we'll get back to doing things a bit more normally. But yeah, don't if you don't know things, don't let that put you off having a go. And there are loads of different citizen science projects that you can join in with. Just to make a note, this one is actually, that's our local version of a whale and dolphin survey. It's actually the National Whale and Dolphin Watch that's going on. Okay, you need your garden to be beside the seaside, but there's one that's coming up that you might be interested in. You could join in with that. We've currently got the Northeast Bee Hunt that we are running in association with the Natural History Society of Northumbria. There's the British Trust for Ornithology. Normally it costs to join their garden birdwatch, but that's free just now. There's recording schemes going on for moths. I know there's an earthworm survey coming up later this year, and there's all sorts of other ones that you can join in with, you know, easily accessible from your garden. So that's sort of the bit of a whistle-stop tour there about recording and recording in gardens. So I'm just wondering if anyone's got any questions, and I'll just have a look at the chat to see if there was anything. So it was all a bit quick there, but I don't know if anybody's got any questions.
I was just wondering, you know how you said like lack of records in a certain area might help, like in terms of encouraging wildlife. How do you decide or determine when that's just because of a lack of interest of recording the species rather than an actual, like, them not being there?
Yeah, you're exactly right. It's basically a kind of a starting point. So if say we pulled out a map and looked at the distribution of a certain species, that does highlight it helps us first of all spot, okay, there's nothing appearing in this area, and really you're right, the first question is that because it isn't there, or is it because it's under recorded? So in a way, gathering the data is a starting point to ask, and that's one of the first questions you would ask. So that's then often a project might arise out of that question. In a way, that's, for example, the bumblebee hunt that's going on just now is, you know, the start of that, doing the survey, and then out of that, the data will be looked at, and we would see, you know, maybe if there were gaps where you might expect something because you know that's habitats there, you could go on and look at it a bit more closely. So it's kind of like, it's sort of all part of a process, I suppose, is maybe the answer to your question. It's never, unless a survey had been comprehensively done in an area, yes, the gaps could be there just because it's under recorded. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I've noticed, especially with moth species, I've recorded a couple in like your area that haven't been recorded here before, and I wasn't sure if that's due to a spread of distribution or if people just haven't picked up on it.
Yeah, I mean, in an instance like that, I would be thinking about getting in touch with like the sort of local sort of recording expert, and you know, they would have the specialized knowledge to, you know, probably answer that question in more detail. They are the people that would hear anecdotal reports, you know, rather than perhaps us. So no, you're right. It's, you know, things quite possibly just haven't been recorded. And I suppose that's why we feel recording is important, because it's only by actively getting out and looking for things that we know whether they're there or not. So, but it is an ongoing process, yeah. Oh, okay. So, oh, sorry, we've just had time. Looks like they're wanting to move us back. So we'll spot those questions in the chat, and we'll make sure they get answered in some form. I'll find out with Louise the best way to do that. But and we'll get some of your questions answered. So I think they're wanting to move us back to the main conference now.